Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to the ADB Seed Symposium 2022 Deep Dive Workshop, Destination Success. My name is Graham Harper, and I will be today's moderator, taking us through the different activities. I am a special advisor for sustainability and social responsibility at the Pacific Asia Travel Association, PATA. And to start things off today, would like to ask our hosts to play an introductory video about our Tourism Destination Resilience Program. Michelle, please.
The pandemic taught us that tourism and destinations were not as disaster-proof as we thought. While COVID dominates the conversation these days, other risks like tornadoes, floods, and financial crises have also been devastating to the travel industry. DMOs have been transforming themselves from destination marketing organizations to destination management organizations. The time is now to protect and strengthen our most important assets, our destinations. That's why the Pacific Asia Travel Association embarked on the Tourism Destination Resilience Project to provide education and custom guidance to destination managers for assessing and managing risks, increasing your adaptive capacity. Take the lead in future-proofing your destination and build it up to be strong enough to survive, sustainably managed to restore balance, while being flexible enough to recover from what comes next. Start making resilience a priority today for a more sustainable future. Take part in Pacific Asia Travel Association's Tourism Destination Resilience.
Wonderful. Next, I'd like to call on our CEO, Liz Ortiguera of the Pacific Asia Travel Association, to give some opening remarks. Liz, could you please turn on your camera and join us?
Welcome, everyone. Dear honored hosts, participants, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Pacific Asia Travel Association, I'd like to thank all of you for joining PATA's Deep Dive Workshop here at the 2022 Southeast Asia Development Symposium, organized by the Asian Development Bank. It is a great honor and pleasure for us to take part in this event, and we're proud to share with you our recently launched Tourism Destination Resilience, or as we like to call it, TDR program. As the Asia Pacific destinations begin to reopen or prepare for reopening, building resilience becomes all the more important. As we all know, the negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on destinations, businesses, communities, and environments has been unprecedented, and no destination manager or tourism business was prepared for a crisis of this scale. With this in mind, PATA's TDR program was developed to help build a more resilient tourism industry by assisting destinations in their COVID-19 recovery, but most importantly, by preparing them for future crises that will certainly come. In today's workshop, you'll have the opportunity to learn what are the necessary steps and capacities for TDR, and how to ensure the competitiveness and success of destinations by reframing the destination's long-term business models towards resilience and sustainability. We will begin the workshop with the PATA Sustainability and Social Responsibility team, headed by Graham, introducing our TDR program and what it involves. You'll be able to understand more about how the program was developed and what it includes, such as our 10 online learning modules. And I'm proud to say that over 25 experts from across our PATA community of experts contributed to the development of this program. Graham will talk more about them soon, but I just want to highlight that these 10 modules on TDR are open sourced and available on PATA's CRC, or Crisis Resource Center website, in 4 different languages currently: English, Vietnamese, Khmer, Bahasa Indonesia. And soon we will have the Thai and Mandarin versions as well. We will continue the workshop with a panel discussion on resilience, and it is a pleasure for us to have our dear panelists here to share their experiences and insights. They are Andreas Hoffmann from the German Corporation for International Cooperation, or GIZ, Tri Chiv from the Ministry of Tourism of Cambodia, and Suyin Lee from Discover Travel. They have years of experience working with tourism, its crises, challenges, resilience, and sustainability. So it will be wonderful to hear their different perspectives on these important topics. Next, we'll go into our breakout sessions, where you will have the opportunity to do deeper dives into specific topics of resilience. It is also a pleasure for us to have some of our TDR experts here leading those breakout sessions. They have been with us through the development of the TDR program since the beginning. So it will be great to listen to their thoughts and experiences with TDR in relation to their fields of experience, as well as you'll have a chance to ask them questions and engage with other participants. We are very happy to welcome Dr. Fanny Vong from the Macau Institute for Tourism Studies to discuss capacity development for resilience and sustainability development. John Bailey from Global Communications Consulting to talk about the important topic of crisis communication. Damien Cook from eTourism Frontiers to tell us about destination management and governance for resilience. And last but not least, Dr. Bijan Kazai from Hotel Resilient to tell us about his experience with resilient infrastructure and digitization. I want to thank all of our expert speakers for joining us today in this workshop and the discussion on tourism destination resilience. Your contribution to the program is invaluable. And as we have learned with the development of TDR, destination resilience requires a multi-stakeholder, holistic, and transformative approach. This is why the program counts on the contribution of a diverse group of experts and advisors. Before we begin this workshop, then, I would like to say again that it is a great honor for us to be invited to SEEDS 2022 to share our program and experience on tourism resilience, with all of you as an important tool towards the effective and sustainable recovery of our Southeast Asian destinations. We hope that you enjoy this deep dive workshop on resilience and sustainability, and that you feel inspired by our speakers to take part in the TDR journey towards resilience. We strongly believe that TDR is extremely important now at the restart of tourism in our region. So please enjoy the workshop, and thank you once again for joining us here today. And I'm really pleased to hear that we have over 500 participants in this workshop today. So thank you and welcome.
Liz, thank you very, very much for the great opening remarks. It's a wonderful way to start the workshop. Based on what Liz has told us, I would like to go further in depth into TDR. And with that, I have prepared a short presentation just to be able to take us through the 7 tools that we will be discussing in more detail throughout this afternoon. So please allow me to share my screen and my presentation, and we will go through this. Okay, thank you. Well, here we are with tourism destination resilience. And, as Liz was saying, as we call it, TDR. Now, first, TDR is a program that helps destinations to recover from not only COVID-19 crisis, which has really dominated us for the last 2 years, but also to be able to better prepare for future crises that are obviously going to be coming at some point. Really, our overall goal is to help build a more resilient tourism industry. And with that, through our CRC website, and you can see the website address up there, as well as the QR code if you want to scan that. And this will be shown again at the end of this presentation. But this is to allow the TDR to be able to provide an Asia-Pacific repository of reliable, fact-based, private and public sector online resources and tools. Now, as Liz was saying, this is coming about from the wealth of experts that are throughout the PATA network. Some of them are with us today, but the experts from around the world, and more particularly from the Asia Pacific region, that have not only allowed us to establish a definition and a framework for tourism destination resilience, but also to be able to create the modules and the content and the tools and resources that are needed for destinations to be able to grow their resilience. This has also come from our PATA team and from the different members in the PATA staff that have been able to dedicate their experience to the building of TDR. And also in the destinations, the different translators and trainers that we've been using to run the in-destination programs and workshops to be able to build the capacity of local destinations for resilience. Now, really, what are we creating here? And what are these 7 tools that we'll be talking about more today? Well, really, all of this is to enable destinations to be able to better withstand adversity and to bounce forward when crisis and disasters do hit. So with that, we have created online open source learning modules. And as Liz said, they're already in 4 different languages with 2 more, Thai and Chinese, coming very, very soon. There's an online searchable resource library of up-to-date and reliable tools, reports, publications that can be used. There's an online destination risk exposure tool, an online destination resilience assessment tool. And these allow destination managers to better understand the kind of risks that their destination faces, but also more importantly, what are the areas of resilience that they really need to focus on in order to improve their capacities? There's also national level programs, workshop trainings, and training of trainers that are being offered. And one of our destinations in the Kingdom of Cambodia, we'll be hearing from the Ministry of Tourism later about that. Sub-national level, DMO level programs, and we have currently 4 programs ongoing in Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. And finally, what we'll be culminating in sort of international level resilience forums that allow the destinations to better understand the kind of opportunities that are available for them from international partners to build up the resources they required to meet the needs of resilience development. Now, when we're talking about tourism destination resilience, we're actually talking about a fairly complex system because tourism is a very, very complex supply chain. And in order to be able to set up the right framework, we had to first be able to look at the different sorts of resiliencies that are involved in destination resilience. And these are, for example, environment, health and safety, community, visitor, and economic. And these resiliencies are often at times at odds with each other. For example, there could be an environmental need that is in conflict with an economic need, or even a community need. Now, with each of these resilience, we've also had to identify different risk factors that are involved in each of them. And these these risk factors actually lead into sort of how we put together the overall framework. Because we start with risk assessment, where the destination identify and make an inventory of all potential risks. We then need to look at the risk management and what are the governance structures required to be able to mitigate the risks. And then that leads into the need to be flexible, the adaptive capacity that, because there's always going to be change, and it's how we meet that change that will enable us to be resilient. Now, these three core areas, risk assessment, risk management, and adaptive capacity, they form that resilience, the ability for the destination to withstand adversity and bounce forward when crises do happen. Now, in our framework, we're also saying that resilience is the foundation for sustainability. Basically, a destination will not be sustainable unless they're first resilient. So in the first core competency, the risk assessment, really what we're doing is we're looking at how to identify hazards and risks and be able to pull those together and then to analyze them, to be able to look at what are the likelihoods and the consequences. And by being able to do that, being able to estimate the overall risk that is at that destination, and then to be able to communicate and to engage with the stakeholders about those risks. Because it's by doing that that we can start then working on our risk management, which is our second core competency. And here we're really talking about governance at that destination level, to have clear vision, plans, and competencies in order to do emergency planning and the required post-crisis management to be able to respond and to be able to recover from the event. And finally, our third competency, which is the adaptive capacity. How we can be able to let the destinations to be able to cope with change. And this is through human capacity development, building of resilient infrastructure, looking at the local supply and demand for tourism, and importantly, looking at the diversification of the tourism product offerings in the destination. And all of this leads to sustainability. And sustainability really as the competitive advantage of what is coming. We've been hearing over the past couple of years of the travelers increasingly wanting to have, destinations that can show their health and safety. And that the lockdowns are also showing how the travelers are rethinking how they want to travel and even slowing down and extending their stays in destinations. This is also coming about how people are willing to, looking to live and work within destinations and, the growth of like the digital nomads. But all of this is really telling us, the vast majority of travelers, that they do want to travel more sustainably. But who do they feel is responsible for that? Well, number one, the destination managers, the government and tourism authorities, and the private sector, the companies that they're traveling with. So it's within our best interests to be able to develop our resilience so that it can better lead to sustainable tourism development that will help us as we emerge from the reopening from the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, just to conclude, what is TDR offering? Well, really, it's giving a transition away from a marketing orientation towards a destination management perspective. It's allowing destinations to identify their key capacities to build resilience. It's allowing them to reframe their values and business models. And with this, really building long-term benefits for communities, environment, and economy. And finally, TDR is allowing them how they can gain investments through partnerships with international organizations to better build resilience programs and projects. And with all of that, we need to also give thanks to our partners at GIZ and BMZ from the German government for all of their support in allowing us to put this program together. Now, that's just a brief introduction to the 7 tools of what TDR is offering. And in order to go a little bit more in depth and be a little bit more interactive about resilience, I'd like to call in my 2 colleagues, Ms. Napason and Ms. Fernanda, who will take you through a short poll, interactive poll, to get some more perspectives on tourism destination resilience. Why? And Fernanda, please turn on your cameras and start taking us through the next activity.
Okay. Thank you, Graham, for your introduction. And hello, everyone. My name is Mai, and today I'm with my colleague Fernanda. We are from Sustainability and Social Responsibility team at PARA. And this session, we would like to see your understanding of the resilience in tourism by asking you a few true or false statements.
Hi, everyone. I'm Fernanda. And so we don't know if you're familiar with the Zoom polls, but they're very simple. You will see that the statements will show up in your screen, and we will read the statements with you, and then you just need to select true or false. And afterwards, we will show you the results and briefly comment on the answers. And don't worry, because all the answers are anonymous.
Yes, right. So let's start with the first statement. Can we have the poll, please? Thank you. So all stakeholders in destination must be involved in the process of building resilience. Is it true or false? You have 30 seconds. Only 10 seconds left. 3, 2, 1. Yeah. Okay. So let's see the result. The answer is true, because resilience can only be achieved through the stakeholder engagement and collaboration, and not only tourism stakeholders, but also health and safety, police and fire departments, ministry, civil society, and communities. Oh, we have 94% of our participants get the answer correct. Wow.
Thank you, Wai.
Next question, Fernanda.
Thank you, Wai. So we can move on to the next question. Michelle, please. So all the risks that a destination is susceptible to are beyond the control of DMOs. True or false? Again, you have 30 seconds.
Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you, everyone. The answers to this one were more close to each other. So, but the answer is false, because some risks are, yes, beyond the control of DMO, such as unexpected political crisis, but others might be caused by lack of contingency measures to deal with predictable risks. So we have 63% that voted false and 38% that voted true. So thank you.
The next question. Thank you. Okay. The risk assessment in tourism means identity hazards and equality and any associated risks within the destination. True or false? Five, four, three, two, one. Time's up. Sorry. So the answer is true, because risk assessment, as we have seen in Grant's presentation before, it means identity or risk in a destination and evaluating their potential consequence at livelihood. Okay, we have 95% of our participants get this one correct. Wow. Next one, Fernanda.
Next question, please.
Okay.
Okay, so focusing on international tourism markets is the fastest and best way to recover from crisis. True or false? We're having some mixed opinions on this one as well. Why? How long we have?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time's up.
Thank you, everyone that answered. So the correct answer is false. Strengthening the local and regional markets is actually a better recovery strategy, as domestic tourists will likely be the first ones that come to your destination. And 58% of participants got this one correct. Next question, please.
Next question, please. Okay. The pressure for destinations to innovate and adapt to change is constantly increasing. True or false? Seems pretty obvious, this one. 10 seconds left. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So yeah, 96% of participants is correct. This one is true, because now more than ever, destinations needs to be robust to withstand shocks and adversities, but at the same time be flexible, adaptable, and innovative. Next one.
Okay, next question. The most common risks faced by a destination are those that have high impact, such as earthquakes and tsunamis. True or false? Very mixed opinions as well.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time's up.
Thank you, everyone. So the answer is actually false. Although high impact events get more attention, the most common risks are actually small scale incidents involving travelers, such as traffic accidents and travel disruptions. And these should be identified and managed as well. So 61% got this one correct.
Next one. Okay, diversifying tourism products and markets increase a destination's adaptive capacity. True or false? You have 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thumbs up. So the answer is true. Yes, and we have 93% of our participants get the answer correct. So having a diverse portfolio and different markets is important for adapting to change that arise from crisis and also inevitable change that happen over time, such as new travel trends and technology. Thank you, everyone. So the next question, Fernanda.
Yes, the last question. Sustainable development cannot be attained while disasters continue to undermine economic growth and social progress. True or false?
30 seconds. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so 67% of participants marked false, but actually it's true because if a destination is not resilient first, years of progress in sustainable development can be lost with a single disaster. So this is why we strongly advocate that resilience must come first, sustainability, than sustainability. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Fernanda, for a very good conclusion. So that's all for our poll interactive poll. And thank you so much for participating. All these topics are covered by the TDR program, which you will learn more in the next sessions. And Graham, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fernanda. Thank you very much, Y. A great session. It was interesting to see the different answers that were coming out there. So thank you. Next, what we would like to do is to have a panel discussion. And we've invited 3 friends to come together to be able to talk about this idea of resilience from different perspectives within tourism. And I'll invite them to turn on their cameras and to join us for the initial panel discussion. First, we have Andreas Hoffmann, who is the project manager for the German International Cooperation Development Agency, GIZ, and one of our key partners in this program. Andreas, please. Next is His Excellency, Mr. Tri Shiv from the Ministry of Tourism, Kingdom of Cambodia. Mr. Tri and his team have been our main partners in Cambodia, setting up the different programs that we're running there for TDR. Mr. Tree, please, if you can join us.
Yeah, thank you.
And then finally, Ms. Suyin Lee, who is the Global General Manager for Discover Travel, a private sector perspective on what is needed for destinations that they work with in order to be more resilient. Suyin, please join us.
Thank you, Gray.
Thanks, Suyin. So Andreas, Suyin, and Mr. Tree, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'd like to kick this off with an initial question for His Excellency, Mr. Tree. And your international cooperation development of the Ministry of Tourism in the Kingdom of Cambodia, you have been working on tourism resilience together with PATA for a while now. And in fact, much of what we will be discussing today is based on the resilience that your team has been working on and promoting. So with that, I was wondering if you would mind to give us an overview of the PATA TDR program and what you have been doing with it and how you feel it can help Cambodian tourism.
Hi, thank you, Graham. First of all, may I express my sincere thanks to PATA team, the donor, GIZ, and all panelists, all the panel of experts who have contributed to the definition of TDR and the development of components and tools with regard to TDR. Just for your information, we have organized the second batch of training of trainers. We finished yesterday, of course, a two-day work program, and we got a lot of success. The program is curious, new, and responsive with regard to the current status of COVID-19. We really appreciate the idea initiative TDO, which is to us very useful and helpful in recovering and restarting our tourism sector in a more sustainable and resilient way. So far, we have integrated resilience-related policies into national agenda, and we have been implementing this tool very effectively with participation and involvement from relevant stakeholders. Yet, the tool that we use, some kind of where we need to test, and what I wish to highlight is TDR is created in a specific context of COVID-19, which is a risk-based approach, and that we can use and mobilize throughout the countries to assess the risk, and at the same time, we can identify the shortage of things with regard to sustainability and resilience. Saying this, I meant we could find some opportunities to elaborate in a more detail a toolkit to measure sustainability and resilience with specific context. We can start with in Cambodia, and then we could scale up to at the countries if possible. But I'm saying this because I have the ambition and the goal to elaborate these tools and components as a toolkit. And with this toolkit, we can go for the implementation to accredit any destination or specific destination with labels or certificates. For your information, Cambodia is a lead country in ASEAN who will be responsible for developing sustainable toolkits to measure, of course, ASEAN toolkit to measure sustainability under the ASEAN Tourism Strategy Plan 2016 and 2025. So with the contribution from PATA and the panel of experts, we will be able to utilize our knowledge and tools we have got from the program. So this is our opportunity that we can look at in the future. Last but not least, I would like to take this opportunity to inform the panel that today the Royal Government of Cambodia has announced the lifting of travel conditions, including we will require no longer PCR test 72 hours. We don't need rapid test upon arrival, and we resume visa on arrival as the same status as pre-pandemic situation. So this is, I think this is the new development Cambodia, and we are ready to welcome all of you and all tourists. So everything back to normal, except you need to be vaccinated. For those who are not vaccinated, fully vaccinated, you will be serving 14-day quarantine at the designated areas by the Ministry of Health. So please, I take this opportunity to disseminate this information. I think this is what you are also looking for. Thank you.
Yes, well, that is great. That's great information. And first of all, I'm sure that Andreas is going to be very happy just to hear about the vision that you have for the future of TDR, not only in Cambodia but also regionally. And I know that there's nobody happier to hear your announcement than Su Yin that Cambodia is going to be opened up. I know, big thumbs up. But with that, let me kind of shift gears a little bit. And Andreas, we've been talking about this, it seems like, for ages. But GIZ has really been a significant stakeholder in the journey that Mr. Tree has just been talking about. And as an international agency working to develop competencies for tourism destinations, somebody has a chicken background. But to be able to do that, and for organizations globally, can you give some insights as to why the German government views tourism resilience as an important tool in international development, and how specifically are you trying to achieve this?
Yes, thank you, Graham. I think the chicken is just happy that Cambodia opened the borders again. So I like that chicken. Also, thank you, Mr. Tree, for framing already how useful the TDR project is. And we at GIZ are happy to hear that because resilience or risk-informed development, that's how we look at it, has not been a hot topic before the COVID crisis stroke, obviously, but we saw over the last 2 years that we have to think a lot about resilience, about adaptive capacities, about risk-informed development. And we had the reason in the session before with Wai and Fernanda, like we not only have to help and support development with our partners around the globe, we also have to make sure this development successes are safeguarded. So if there's a lot of multi-year, multi-decade work put into joint development projects, or countries have made great success in economic, social, and environmental development, and then disaster strikes unprepared and unbeknownst what to do about it, then we have lost decades worth of development successes. And that's why I think it's important to work on risk-informed development and working with destinations, but also companies, and about risk-informed destination management, risk-informed company management, to be better prepared when disaster strikes. Because if you think before something happens and you think it through and you have the information in your head, and if you work with organizations like PATA or the Ministry of Tourism in Cambodia to take your time to think through what might happen and how you could prepare for that, then a development is safeguarded. So that's why we support it. And you're all on mute, and you're
Yes,
also not alone. Yeah.
And I'm just unmuting myself, so no problem. But yeah, thank you. And I mean, that's a very, very good perspective about, you know, how decades of development efforts can be wiped out, and that we need to be able to build that resilience for it. With that, let's go to Soo Yin. Now, Soo Yin, you're coming from, you know, sort of a slightly different background, the private sector. And, you know, we wouldn't have tourism if it wasn't for the private sector. So to help our audience understand your work and what makes your company special, could you give us a brief sort of overview of Discover Travel and how it values resilience and sustainability of the destinations which you work with?
Sure. Thank you for the invitation. And Mr. Tree, I'm so delighted to hear that news. It is music to my ears. Discover is a destination management company. We operate in Asia, Mexico, and the Caribbean. We're B2B. We aim to deliver an immersive and meaningful experience for our travelers when they come into our destinations. And obviously, we can't deliver this without the long-term support and the collaboration of our host communities, which is why sustainability is so important to us. I guess Discover is a little bit different. 95% of our people, our workforce and our leadership team is local. So I feel we have a responsibility to them to create travel experiences that not only sustain or enrich their communities, but also to preserve their culture and the environment. So as a travel business, you know, if we can't withstand shocks, these livelihoods that depend on tourism won't be sustainable, can't be sustained. So that's why this is core to what we do at Discover.
Okay, so I mean, really, and a lot of what you're talking about is that sort of, you know, story of responsible tourism, and, you know, how it can be driven by a for-profit company, which wants to improve their business by improving host communities. You know, here at PATA, we view resilience as a foundation for sustainable tourism development. From that perspective, how would you see your work as adding to resilience of tourism across Asia and the Caribbean and Mexico and the different areas that you are in?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think during the pandemic, and it was a wake-up call for all of us, you know, most of us had to downsize our workforce. So we focused our time and what little investment we had on the reinvention of our business to make sure we emerge stronger than we did pre-pandemic. And we certainly can't go back to the way we were, I don't believe. So we invested very heavily in building capabilities in a number of areas. First and foremost is entrepreneurship. So a lot of our guides and drivers and service providers obviously had no income, and a lot of them had pivoted back to their own family businesses or new ventures. So we spent a lot of time running a business skills program that really helped set them up for success, so that they understood, you know, the dynamics of running a business, what that means, the risks, the opportunities, and gave them some support in terms of business mentorship and pro bono consultancy services in marketing, in technology, in sales, so that they had the basic foundation to be able to run good businesses that would be sustainable. Secondly, we lost a lot of funds for our community projects. And so we decided to do on our own initiative fundraisers to complete key projects like a dormitory for a high school in Laos. And, you know, without education, there is no foundation, I think, is how we saw that. You know, we completed a water filtration project in northern Thailand, because without clean water, that community really had no foundation to do anything, to create sustainable livelihoods. And then last but not least, we created a farm to table project in Bali to support villagers who lost their livelihoods through tourism, and we help them convert their lands into organic farms. And out of that, we've created a community-based rural tourism project now that will give them an alternate livelihood as travel comes back. So they have both farming as well as tourism in that space. So I think, and last but not least, technology, I think we all had a reduced workforce. So by having the ability to automate as much as we could upskill the existing workforce to create or to perform higher value functions. And obviously with better skills, you have better competitiveness, which then adds to the resilience of that destination and certainly of the communities that are there. So we did spend a lot of money on technology, not just in automation, but also distribution, which is important because when travel comes back, we will be able to take these offerings, these travel offerings further and wider and in a less labor intensive way. So we should be able to get better reach with less effort. So yeah, so I think there are some of the key areas that we've really sort of invested in. It's really around building capabilities and making sure the foundation of these communities and these destinations is as strong as it can be.
Fantastic. And Suyin, you know that I'm a great fan of the community projects, and I was so happy to see that school dormitory finished.
Me too.
Just for all of our viewers, I worked in those communities for about 15 years, and I remember when they only had bamboo huts in order to be able to stay for their schooling. So a great improvement. Congratulations.
Thank you.
But let's transition a bit, away from that sort of capacity development, work support for communities, and technology development within the private sector. Andreas, back to you, because this whole idea of COVID. I mean, it's the most significant event, and many have argued that despite all of our progress, a lot, as you said before, has gone away. So one of the core capacities of the TDR program is this idea of adaptive capacity, what Suyin was just talking about, for example, with the technology. Can you share some of your thoughts on, what is adaptive capacity and why it's needed? And how is GIZ working with both public and private sectors for adaptive capacity?
Mm-hmm. Well, you just said it. GIZ really tries to create networks first and foremost between private sector and public sector and convene these two spheres together, because that's what we need to create destination resiliency and also strengthen adaptive capacity. And Suyin, I actually heard more that she's not just talking about technology, but about people, because tourism and destinations is about people. What's in their minds, what are their relationships with each other. They're also part of companies, of public sector actors. They also move. So regardless of what happens of COVID, the people are still around. They don't just disappear, but they adapt. They move to new places. And we can help people and companies to adapt, to know when something adverse happens, that they're not just like this chicken we just heard running around screaming, but that they actually took their time to think it through. That's what I also said before. And this, that's I think one of our main goals working with PATA and also the other partners like ILO or the German Tour Operators Initiative for Sustainability. We want to provide a space and time for companies and destinations to sit down, think, because in daily business, I know from my own time at a tour operator, I had to think about the next file or the next deal I had to close. That somebody took me at my hand to sit down and think, what would happen if, or did you ever think about, you have this great people, they cannot only do this and that, they can also do something new. Like in our Sri Lanka project, the hotels realized, hey, we have food processing equipment in our kitchens. Let's do a consumer-facing brand with chutneys and sauces until COVID is over, and that helped them to keep farmers employed and also their kitchen staff employed during the crisis. And it's these little sparks of ideas which you only have if you think about it. And how it works and what it is, I think you just showed in the CRC and the 10 modules. Like if you work this one through, or TSX modules on atingi.org, we have on a different level modules, then you learn how to do it and what it is. But the important thing, I think, is to convene the right people who would not normally find the time to talk to each other, and provide them space to think it through before something happens. Because if something happens, you will sound like the rooster before, and then it's too late.
Good analogy. And Andreas, I think you'll be happy to know that over 30 of the GIZ online courses from Atingi are also in the TDR online resource library. So if any of our participants go to the CRC site and go to the resource section, in the searchable part, under resilience and sustainability, you'll see a number of those GIZ online courses as well. Now, just in terms of the sort of time that we have left for this session, I'd actually like to jump over back to His Excellency, Mr. Tree. And Mr. Tree, I'd like to ask if you were to give advice to a tourism destination management organization that wished to develop a resilience tourism attraction, what would that be? How do you get local governments and other important stakeholders behind such developments so that they can best support and encourage, responsible private sector, for example, Discover?
I thank you so much, Graham. And may I first reach out to Andrea for your kind support. And of course, I think we could find out a possibility to talk a little bit more on the implementation of a TDR part within Cambodian context or ASEAN context, as Cambodia is supposed to take some roles. To the question, not really profession, if I were to give recommendations. I think COVID-19 is also an opportunity besides the side effect and the negative impacts we are facing now. Opportunities lies in a way that we should be able to visualize the picture of a next crisis or pandemic. Now it's time to prove that resilience and sustainability is must. It's not a political message. It's not a convincing gesture, but it's real. We need to implement. We need to go for this sustainability and resilience. Of course, we really appreciate the idea of, and it is the fact, sustainability is competitiveness advantage. Graham, really appreciate this concept. And the most important thing is how we educate our people about this. So I think the advice or recommendation I should make is to educate the key players that resilience or sustainability is competitiveness advantage. It's not an investment, but it's really an input that promotes high return in a sustainable way. Second thing is how to promote this. It is human capital. And by human capital, we need to look at the patterns of tourism employment in general, everywhere, developing or developed countries. Most of people working in industry are MSME, part-time job, ladies, women, some jobs are exposed to volatilities. So when we need to build up a sustainable human capital, we need to think of the ecosystem of these things: tourism ecosystem, skill ecosystem, everything that support the system. And for the involvement from private sector is a must. As mentioned by Andreas in your interventional project development project, we need to enhance public-private sector. And how we involve in the post-COVID-19. Of course, we talk a lot about the collaboration, cooperation, involvement, but it should take some special pattern of collaboration after post-COVID-19, during post-COVID-19. So I think human capital, technological advancement, and the new trend of tourism, world tourism, should be taken into consideration with a new thinking of tourism. And yes, of course, I could not go further because all the information you shared, Graham, is really complete, and I could not say anything more. I thank you so much.
Well, Chiv, actually, I think you probably could say a lot more because I know you have many, many more ideas. But, our time is limited and we're actually coming up to our break. But listen, just before we do finish, I want to give Soo Yin sort of a final word. And, Soo Yin, look ahead 4 years. It's now 2026. COVID is in the history books to maybe a certain extent. Tourism is back. What do you think our industry has learned, and how are we better prepared for the next great event? You have 1 minute.
Okay, I think for me personally, I think for our business, we've learned that diversification is everything. So I think to make sure that you do have a very strong core in terms of your workforce that are multi-skilled, that are flexible, that can really innovate, push boundaries, and pivot to different offerings. And I think the second thing I've learned, which is really, and I'm an optimist, but now I've learned to just plan for the worst. Always plan for the worst case scenario. And I think, that's something that we have to build into our process and our culture.
Okay, being optimistic by planning for the worst. There you go.
There you go.
Soo Yin, thank you so much. Your Excellency, Mr. Tree, thank you so much. And Dr. Hoffman, Andreas, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, we're going to be taking just a short break to allow other people to be able to join us in the Zoom call for our upcoming breakout sessions. And as we're in the break, we'd like to play another video to show some more details about the TDR program and why this whole concept of resilience in tourism destinations is an important one. So with that, Soo Yin, Mr. Tree, Andreas, thank you very much. Michelle, if we could play the next video, that would be wonderful. And everyone, we will be joining together in 10 minutes to be able to start our next session, which will be breakouts with our experts so that you can ask questions and get more details on this process.
Tourism destinations are exposed to many risks, from the COVID-19 pandemic to natural disasters and financial crises. In order to remain resilient, DMOs must shift from destination marketing to destination management.
Working on improving our resilience means we become the masters of our own luck. Resilience is being able to better understand your own vulnerabilities and capacities, as well as potential risks.
But where does one even begin that process? The Pacific Asia Travel Association designed the Tourism Destination Resilience Program, to equip destinations with the necessary tools, skills, and capacities for them to embark on the journey toward resilience.
With this toolkit and set of principles, we could access and complement our witness, and we can invite all the stakeholders on the same page.
Tourism destination resilience begins by taking DMOs through a robust training program, mindfully tailored to each destination's unique needs.
For Cambodia, which is the country that depends a lot on tourism, and more than 70% of people working in tourism sector are from rural areas where education is considered low or not enough to fully understand the concept.
Beginning with tools for risk assessment and risk management, followed by online modules to gain knowledge, strategies, and skills. This process increases the destination's adaptive capacity with a strong focus on human capacity development.
The challenges for us is about the human capital in both public and private sector, because the human capital in different provinces has different issue. We do need to understand what they need, the public sector, to help them, to provide them the training. We need to listen to them, and we need to discuss with them, need to consult with them. What do they need from us to support them?
Destinations are supported with an online resource library, e-learning modules, and in-person professional development workshops. The process culminates with a remarkable opportunity to network and present to organizations who can financially assist in your quest for resilience and sustainability. A game-changing moment for your destination.
The only fact we know for sure is that there will be change and that we need to adapt to that change. Right now, the tourism sector is not sufficiently prepared for this change. The TDR project is supporting the tourism industry in preparing for the changes that are needed.
We advocate that for a tourism destination to be sustainable, it must first be resilient. Years of progress on regenerating an ecosystem or eliminating poverty could be lost in a single disaster. Tourism Destination Resilience's pathway to sustainability guides destinations through a step-by-step process for them to learn how to approach challenges head-on. Start making resilience a priority today for a more sustainable future. Take part in Pacific Asia Travel Association's Tourism Destination Resilience.
Welcome back. Welcome back, and hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope that you had a good break. In this next session, we're going to be holding breakout groups. And in each of these groups, we've asked one of our experts, tourism experts that have been working with us as we've developed the program, to be able to share their time, share their experience, and share their ideas about destination resilience. So I'd like to ask them to, one by one, join us and turn on their videos, and to just give a very brief introduction about their session that will be coming up. The first is, I'd like to ask Dr. Fanny Vong. Fanny is not only on the PATA board of directors, but she is also the president of the Macau Institute for Tourism Studies. Fanny, welcome. And I'd like to just go back to my introduction about the TDR process, where I mentioned about the 5 resiliencies of TDR. And perhaps one, I think one that's maybe most important and dear to my heart, is community. Now, to achieve community resilience, there are many risks that can arise, such as inequality of income distribution, resource allocation, disempowerment, and gender can be a cross-cutting issue throughout. Would you be able to share some of your insights into communities and the role that they play and human capacity development plays within building of resilience in tourism destinations.
Hello, Graham. Thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity. I feel very honored to be among distinguished peers in this panel session. Talking about communities, first of all, let us understand that communities are important building blocks of the society. And if we put it in a tourism context, it is an important building block of any destination. It is a group of people with shared identity. They have collective memory and attachment to the place they belong to. And it is because of this that we can say communities are homogeneous in a sense. Yet, it is also very diverse because, like you said, every community is made up of members from different backgrounds. Diverse because of what they acquired by birth and identity, age, gender, ethnicity. But it's also acquired background differences through education, life experiences, the profession, and so on. But no matter what, I think communities have an adaptive gene in themselves. Why? Because imagine all these many people from diverse backgrounds, they are able to accept each other's differences and they feel attached to the same community. So we can really make use of this attachment and this adaptability to build further, to enable these community members by empowering them so that they become mobilized when there is a need to prepare for risk. And when that really happens, to mobilize them to quickly help to restore order and stability. So to do this, we have to give them proper tools and training. And I think that is where your TDR comes in. It is a very powerful tool if used correctly and if people know and have access to these tools and information. And I think it is very important to make use of community knowledge, the local knowledge. Because, with developing countries, it's always a common practice that they like to bring in external partners to come in to help them, right? In this case, yes, TDR parties also coming in. But what I appreciate most is that you're also trying to listen. You're doing that very, very well, to listen to local voices. Because local knowledge is what gives communities a competitive edge over external partners. With the input in formulating strategies in building tourism destination resilience, you can address exactly local needs and you come up with more practical and realistic plans and strategies. Well, in tourism destinations, communities are an important stakeholder for tourism. Community-based tourism, like some speakers have already said, they're very, it adds to the competitiveness of destinations. It diversifies the package, the tourism package that you can offer. In a sense, it increases the destination appeal and it will make the destination stronger. But for community-based tourism to be successful, you have to have local inputs. Like the local people will have ownership, they should have control over the tourism resources, and they should have a say in planning and managing those resources to design products and services that can appeal to the tourists, and more so if they can appeal to regional tourists, so that these products can really complement the international tourism. Because nowadays we say we cannot totally depend too much on international tourism. So the process of building resilience involves a lot of steps, and I think we really have to devise strategies to engage the community. Because don't forget, those people we cannot engage or we fail to engage, they will be more exposed to risk, first thing. And second, they themselves may be a very bad influence in the whole process on other community members. So that affects the effectiveness of your whole plan. Talking about engagements, there are different groups in the communities, as we realize. Some have better access to information, some have better social status, voices are better heard than others. Women are a particularly vulnerable group, but they often play the role of care providers in the family. So in terms of crisis, this role as care provider is even more pronounced. And sometimes this role will make women sacrifice their own self-interest and well-being. Now, the way a woman perceives risk, prepare for it, how they react during crisis, how they cope with the situation after crisis, affects not only themselves. Graham, I'd like to remind that as care providers, their actions, their thinking would also affect other family members under their care. So if you empower women, you're actually helping many other community members who may be vulnerable, like youth and elderly, who are under their care. So that's why it is important for the government or for those with power to find ways and strategies to empower women, to give them access to information, education, give them opportunity to participate through, for example, setting quotas in certain committees and governance structures. There are many other ways that we can do this, and I think we'll have a lot of time to explore in our later session.
Yes, thank you. And that's an excellent introduction into the complexities of the communities and the people, really. And as you were saying about the women also, and how important that is. Okay, thank you. Next, I'd like to ask John Bailey. John, if you wouldn't mind turning on your camera. And John is the managing consultant of Global Communications Consulting. John, welcome back, and it's always a pleasure to do sessions with you. Now, John, your work with organizations across the globe and advising on how to communicate before, during, and after crises. During the past 2 years, and even the events of the past 2 weeks even, have highlighted the importance of communication. Can you give us a few key insights into what destination managers must be considering in their communication strategies? Please just try to keep it into a few minutes so that we can get into the breakouts.
Thanks very much, Graham. Good day, everybody. As Graham says, communication is an essential component of crisis response. The decisions, the actions which are being taken need to be communicated. So they're clearly received, clearly understood by all the affected parties. And that takes very careful planning and very careful execution as well. And of course, when you talk about resilience, building resilience, in this case within a destination, that takes a lot of careful planning as well. And part of that is building the capacity to respond. So building a response plan, and an integral part of that plan, of course, is the communication response. So some of the things that need to be considered as a starting point, who will actually take the lead on this? If you're dealing with a private organization, I've worked with probably 70 airlines, several major hotel groups. I'm currently working with a large oil and gas company in the Middle East, which is a new experience, but the same basic approach applies. If you're dealing with a private organization, the typical best practice model is a crisis management team would be assembled, representing all of the key decision makers within the affected functions within that organization. And the head of the communications team would always sit on that strategic crisis management team. And then below that, you have tactical teams that then execute on the decisions that are being made. The difficulty when you're talking about a destination is the complexity. So who, as a starting point, will take the lead in assembling that crisis management team? Who would sit on that crisis management team? Who would be responsible for communications? Would it be the DMO? Would it be the mayor of the city, if it's a city destination? Would it be the provincial government? Would it be the national government? Would it in fact be the president or prime minister of the country? To some extent, that depends on what you're actually dealing with. But these are all factors that need to be built into your thinking and your planning. And of course, when you're talking about private sector organizations, they also need to think very carefully about their planning. So hotel groups, for example, tour operators, cruise lines, the other components of the value chain, they all have a role to play in their own internal crisis planning, which includes how they will communicate to their own stakeholders. But of course, the messages that they're communicating, the decisions, the actions that they're communicating must in turn ladder up to the decisions and the messages that are coming out of the DMO or the provincial or the national government. Now, when it comes to actually developing a communication plan, there's a very well understood process. And in fact, if you visit the CRC website, there is a guide to communication strategy planning. And it, of course, starts like any communication campaign with what is your objective? What are you actually trying to achieve with this communication outreach? The second question then is, who do we need to engage with? I was interested in listening to Fanny talking about community. And of course, when you start looking at stakeholders, there are multiple sub-stakeholders or complexities within each group of stakeholders. So you need to build a list of stakeholders and understand who do you need to communicate and engage with, and what are their concerns in this particular situation. Then, of course, what do we want to tell them? What is it we want those people to know, to think, to feel, or in fact to do in this particular situation? How are we going to do that? What channels are we going to use to engage with them? Is it going to be the news media? Maybe. Is it going to be an entirely online campaign run across social channels? Is it going to be all about developing content? Are we going to engage with influencers? Are we going to reach out to third-party external advocates? Maybe it's all of the above. So again, this all needs very careful consideration in the planning process. And lastly, how do we actually measure success? How do we define what success looks like? And broadly, you can measure two different things. You can measure your outputs, how frequently are you communicating, what channels are you using, how often you're getting your spokespeople into first-tier, top-tier media, for example. But a much more meaningful way of looking at it is what are the outcomes we're achieving, the tone of the coverage, where the coverage is appearing, what actions people are taking as a result of what they're hearing and seeing from our organization. So as I said, the secret to success in all of this is very careful planning, and we'll dive into that in more detail in the breakout session.
Yeah, and I mean, what a challenge to try to summarize all that in a few brief moments and comments. But John, well done. And, you know, I'm sure it'll be fascinating breakout sessions. Next, Damien, if you're ready, I'd like to ask you to turn on your camera and to join us. I'd like to introduce Damien Cook, who is the CEO and founder of eTourism Frontiers. Damien, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you see me and hear me?
We can see and we can hear you. And Damien, thank you so much. I know that it's been a frantic last few minutes as you got yourself organized. You're on location.
Yes, sorry, apologies.
No problems at all. And it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Yes,
Damien,
good morning, everybody.
Yeah, Damien, listen, you've been advising PATA on the Crisis Resource Center and the TDR program for over the past 2 years. And as you work with tourism destinations all over the world, what do you see as the most important decisions and actions that DMOs can do to respond, rethink, and recover in times of crises?
Thanks, and morning, everybody. I'm here in Aqaba in Jordan. Apologies for my network issues this morning. We had some connectivity issues, but I hope everything's coming through clearly now. But thanks, Graham. Yeah, I work with a lot of destinations around the world, have been working with them through their recovery period from COVID and with PATA on building resources around that. And I think if you look at the TDR, which is a great resource for learning more about this, one of the strong messages we wanted to bring out is that really addressing crises and becoming resilient to crises at a destination level and destination management level is not so much about a crisis per se as change, that there is an ongoing issue in destination management, which we don't have to define as a crisis, which has been change. And what we see during crises is that often existing changes get accelerated by that crisis or by those events. We very much saw that in COVID. COVID itself, I mean, to some extent, wasn't really a crisis. It was a phenomenon. A crisis is something that you can contain and manage in a single place. COVID was a phenomenon that affected every single person on the planet at some level, personal, economic, social. And again, what you see from that is the impact that crises have on behavior, on perceptions, on the way that people understand travel, think about travel, become concerned about travel. And that's addressing change. In the case of those crises, it's very immediate change, but there are longer term changes that we need to consider that have been impacting travel for a long time. Some of those changes accelerated by a crisis like COVID, some of them decelerated. And it's much more effective when you look at long-term sustainable destination management strategies to think about those elements of change. And what I see as important for destinations is 3 areas of change that have been really impacting travel over the last few decades. In brief, we can talk more about this in our sessions, but number 1 has been the rise of technology, which has probably brought about more change in the travel sector than anything else in the previous century, in terms of distribution, in terms of marketing, in terms of access to information about destinations. Technology has been the biggest driver of change. We saw that accelerate during COVID as people became more than ever online consumers because they had no choice. People that didn't used to shop online began shopping online. People that didn't used to watch streaming content began streaming content. People became more digitally native. So that's increased that digital change through that crisis. Number 2 is the demographic change of markets. So moving beyond just new and emerging markets in the market landscape, looking at demographic shift within markets, and particularly that driven by generational change. The rise of millennials becoming the predominant travelers around the planet had much more impact on markets than previous generational shifts, again, connecting back to technology, because those are individuals that have grown up online and grown up using digital sources, and they've had a huge amount of choice in front of them, which has let them customize their travel experience. That has eroded the mass tourism model and the package tourism model that had dominated previously. Again, during COVID, what we see is that the millennials are some of the first travelers back, some of the first travelers to begin traveling again. They had the confidence to start traveling again. They felt that they trusted the travel environment. They found that information online. And thirdly is the ability for destinations to understand that and to actually address that in their strategies. And now as we look at people emerging from the COVID crisis, we see decisions being made based around the market changes, but we need to be very careful and make sure we're doing that in the right way. Recognizing that those fully independent travelers, those younger digitally connected travelers are going to be a core market means changing the approach we take. Are we going to wait as a destination until we reach a point where mass tourism models can resume? Wait till we fill up those cruise ships and those package resorts with enough people who have the confidence to travel? That may take a long time, as we're seeing in many places, and maybe necessitate huge price dumping to achieve that. Or are we going to focus on those smaller, high yield, longer staying, higher spend independent travelers who have the confidence to travel now? We also see destinations thinking that the management of the crisis now needs to be reflected in their destination marketing, that we need to talk about protocols, talk about masks, talk about sanitization as part of our marketing message. That's an assumption. It's not a marketing message. People are not going to travel to you just because you're well sanitized. That's something they assume will be there. And people are saying that maybe tourists now need a more structured experience, that people will be going back to the old tour operator driven model because they want a structured travel experience to give them the confidence to travel. But the reality is for a lot of those initial travelers we're seeing, they've spent the last 2 years being told what to do. They've been forced to live in a very structured environment for 2 years. That's probably the last thing they now want in a travel experience, is again, to be rigidly controlled through their travel experience. So understanding the importance of change that technology has brought about, that generational shift has brought about, and that travel behavior has brought about is essential to good destination management. And it's not just about a crisis, it's understanding as that crisis accelerated or decelerated that rate of change that we're seeing that's been there for some years, and making sure we reflect that in our strategies and our approaches to destination management.
Damien, fantastic. Thank you. That's a great introduction, and I'm sure looking forward to the things coming up. Okay. Our last breakout session is going to be led by Dr. Bijan Kazai of Hotel Resilient. You're not only the CEO, you're also the founder. Bijan, if you could turn on your camera and please join us. Now, Bijan, you have been involved in tourism resilience with PATA really since the Sendai framework sessions that were held back in 2015. I think you and Paul, our chief of staff, were involved in that. Your current company, which has grown out of that, is deeply involved in advising and building capacity for resilient infrastructure and digitization, especially in the hospitality sector. And what would you advise tourism destination managers to develop for their resilience in order to, build their digital infrastructures?
Yeah, thank you, Graham. Good morning, our time here to everyone. So what Fanny said about resiliency in communities, John talked about in terms of communication plans, and Damien just now on rethinking response and recovery are also absolutely relevant to resiliency of infrastructure. We often think about infrastructure as hard infrastructure like streets and bridges and power and water, telecommunication networks. But infrastructure are also services, people, communities in a destination for whom this quality infrastructure is a lifeline to better health, education, and livelihoods. So maybe I can just add a few more thoughts then to what was said in terms of resiliency of infrastructure. I think as a paradigm that only takes place when it's treated as risk-based, multi-stakeholder, and a holistic or integrated approach. Incidentally, these are the three descriptors how PATA defines their resiliency in the tourism destination resiliency framework that you presented earlier, Graham.
Well, Bijan, we did have you as an advisor, so I mean.
So yeah, I'll say a few words about each. So first, risk-based, right? This also goes hand in hand with digitization. There is just so much science, plethora of data on hazard, vulnerability, exposure risk, but often that's locked up in universities, insurance, reinsurance companies, government ministries. What you need to build infrastructure resiliency and destination, I think, are open platforms, digital tools, to make this information available, but also relevant to the functions of tourism organizations. So you need good data, but you also need translation of that data into tools and software about what's the likelihood and severity of these types of risks and their impact. What are direct tangible impacts, like, how redundant is your interdependent infrastructure in a destination in case there is a disruption in one of your networks? What's the impact on supply chain and production services? But you're also now talking about intangible impacts that require more holistic or qualitative approaches to assess, like loss of cultural heritage or know-how, intellectual property, impact on innovation. So as the saying goes, what is not measured cannot be managed. And risk assessment is really the foundation and the core to building resiliency. On the other hand, so the second point is multi-stakeholder. You need a multi-stakeholder interagency, public-private partnership approach. Otherwise, your risk assessment findings may never actually be integrated into the functions of these different agencies you're trying to address. This is not just local planning departments, emergency services, utility companies, the usual suspects, but also importantly, tourism organizations. In fact, tourism organizations, particularly DMOs, are key stakeholders in determining infrastructure resilience as an outcome in their destination, but unfortunately, they're often not involved in this multi-stakeholder approach as they could or should be. And one barrier to that is knowledge and awareness among these organizations for what is needed to grow resilience. That is why the trainings and capacity building programs that PATA has developed for local destinations is so important. So yeah, we need risk assessments, multi-stakeholder approach, but to really integrate and mainstream these assessment findings into resiliency outcomes, we need systemic risk management practices in the form of policy, in the form of regulatory frameworks, of risk-informed development planning, economic and financial incentives, and standards. Not just having standards, but enforcing those standards. And I'll just say at Hotel Resilient, we focus on each one of these three areas to build resiliency for the accommodation sector. So one of the key infrastructures within a destination, we first had to develop the risk management standards. So that went back to the 2015 Sendai framework, where PATA, GIZ, and the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Office actually saw that there was a need for consistent standards on climate change adaptations and risk management. Those had to be put in place, but these standards cannot be generic. They have to be risk-based and adjusted based on the local context and conditions. That's where digitization comes in, providing easy-to-use software that gives hotels with relevant metrics on their exposures. And then software-supported resilience solutions is what drives our programs. Finally, hotels are not an island. They don't function on their own. They depend on the functioning of the infrastructure and services and communities within a destination. That's why a destination-wide resiliency approach is so important, and why tourism organizations really have to be integrated as part of a multi-stakeholder planning, development, and decision-making process.
Bijan, fantastic, and thank you very much. And as we're approaching the end of our workshop, we'd like to just do some conclusion of the breakout groups. Could I please ask our four experts, Dr. Fanny, Bijan, Damien, and John, if you would all please turn on your cameras. And could I also please ask if the PATA staff who have been in the breakout sessions with you, Paul, Fawn, and Fernanda, and Alithia, if you would also just please turn on your cameras. Now, I think what would be nice is if each of the breakout room teams, Fanny and Alithia, John and Fawn, Damien, Fernanda, and Bijan and Paul, if each of you could maybe just give a very, very short summary of, sort of the discussions that you had, some of the questions and things that came up. For our participants that are listening in, as you're listening to the summaries of each of the breakouts, there may be some more questions that you have. Please, if you want, you can just put those into the chat function of this meeting room. And at the end, if there's a bit of time and you want to also ask your question to one of the experts, by all means, please take the opportunity. Fanny, why don't we start with both you and Alithia, and if you wouldn't mind just giving a quick sort of overview of some of your discussion, please.
Thank you, Graham. Well, we had two very interesting breakout rooms. The first room, we had participants from UK, Hawaii, also Philippines, and we discussed, how to engage communities. And the responses we got was mostly from top down. So they had this experience of engaging key community leaders. Right. And of course, we had concern, we shared our concern about, how then do you reach actual people? Then in the second breakout room, we found our answers, because in the second breakout rooms, we had more representation of young people and women, and they told us a different experience. The young people, they get a voice out through associations and church groups, charity associations. I think that is a very good way. For women, in some parts of Philippines, they set up women associations or women committees. So I think that's a very good initiative. And then we also discussed, engaging different types of stakeholders. So it's not just the actual people or key community leaders, but also enterprises, NGOs, different government agencies, non-government agencies. Right, so I think the key message here is to engage the community. It has to be really multi-stakeholder approach and multi-communications channel.
Very good. Thank you, Fanny. Alithia, you're always into community building. I mean, I know that's one of your passions. Any real insights that stood out for you?
I think it was really beautiful to see the responses from our participants who gave such diverse examples of resilient communities within that they are working with and they are researching on. So I remember one of the participants, her name is Sherry from Philippines. She does research on coastal communities, fisheries, and small islands in the Philippines, and how those islands can be resilient. What tools do they need? What are the people saying that they need? And I think we had so many different diverse examples of communities within our breakout rooms that came up. It was very beautiful to see.
Nice, nice. I'm glad that there was beauty coming out of it. That's fantastic. Okay, let's go to one of the other breakout groups. John, why don't we go to you and Fawn and to hear your sort of insights?
Yes, thanks, Graham. I think that the three key things for me in our breakout, one was I talked quite a bit about my experience in Phuket after the tsunami, where I was deployed for 3 months as part of the strategic response, and just how difficult it is to try and impose a structure in the middle of chaos. And it was a chaotic situation. So the key takeaway from that is the time to start talking about it is now. Some of the questions were, for example, where would we start? If we're the DMO, where would we start? Well, start by thinking through all of the stakeholders, if you like, upstream from you, in government, regional government, national government, ministry level, etc., and all of those downstream from you. As Fanny said, local community associations, enterprises, private sector companies, NGOs. And then one suggestion was, if you're the DMO, a good first step would be to host a symposium, make it scenario based, and bring all of those representatives of all those stakeholders into the room. Every journey starts with one step, and that's a very good first step. And this is going to be a very long, complex journey. The other questions were about, all right, so if we start there, how can we be sure we're engaging with the right stakeholders? How can we then be sure our message is right? Well, in fact, I just referred, without going into a lot of detail, I just referred people to the CRC website because that communication strategy document hosted on the website addresses all of those elements in a lot of detail. So that was really the summary of it for me. But I think the main takeaway I got from the participants is there's a degree of apprehension that this is really complicated. So where would we start? Fun. I don't know if you had the same impression.
Yeah, Fawn, I mean, you're our strategic partners manager at PATA. And I mean, it's all about bringing the people together and making sure you have successful communication. So what were your insights?
One thing I've learned from John is thank you, John. He's very good advisor. Like he provide us like the good steps how to deal with the communication step. And one thing I've learned from one of the questions that we got from the participant is about the messaging that we send out to stakeholders. I kind of had that kind of question in mind as well, but because our business, PATA business, is focusing on the travel business, right? So it's like if we deal with the local tourism or international tourism, that was the same question as me. Like if we have to focus on the local or international tourism, how can we create the right message to them? And then John gave us the good advice that okay, if we know who we should target, and then that's it, we can have a good plan after that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Fawn. Let's move next, Bijan and Paul. Listen, you guys have been working together on this thing about resilience since 2015 at the Sendai framework. But what came out in your breakout groups and what insights were you able to get?
Yeah, thank you, Graham. Maybe I'll go, and Paul, feel free to chime in. We've led workshops together, and what we try to do first is look at some facts and figures globally also, and what is at stake in terms of infrastructure resiliency, and then sort of also inspect this engineering often mindset of what resiliency for infrastructure means. The 4 R's: resourcefulness, rapidity, redundancy, robustness, going back into an operational status, but really go beyond that in terms of transformative and adaptive capacities, innovation, and how to look at infrastructure resiliency more holistically. So with that context, we had small groups, so we could get into some discussions in terms of challenges of building resiliency in destinations. And we heard from some participants, one big challenge is access to financing, resources to make this happen. While there are so many sources out there, it's not clear as John said, where do you start? How do you make a case? And going back to risk assessment and portraying exactly what your losses are in terms of cost benefit analysis, and these types of things are a lot cheaper to do now. Could make convincing arguments to organizations like the World Bank, like ADB, to help create these types of incentives and finances. We also heard, I think, from Michael Ling, in terms of digitization and digital technology, software supported solutions, in this case, in terms of sustainability, in terms of climate impact. So there's a lot of room for software and technology to make this path easier towards, getting solutions and building resiliency. And then I was also very excited to see someone from Legazpi, local government unit there. I was there many years ago, and I know they're facing so many different hazards. And they talked about their main instrument, which is the comprehensive development plan, that gets built over many years. In 6 years, Joseph was telling us it took them to develop it. And as part of that is a risk-informed planning process. So those types of planning tools, which is by itself a multi-stakeholder planning tool that supports building infrastructure resiliency. So those are some of the thoughts that were expressed. I don't know, Paul, you want to follow up on some of that as well?
And I think that, I was interesting. It's something that we've got PATA talk about, right? And how to help destinations. But this idea of, resources in terms of investments, where does that money come from? How do we get the funding to build a resilient destination, right? And saying that there's many organizations out there, I had said to the participant that there's many organizations out there that can help, that can, fund it, or provide a loan, a low interest loan or a zero interest loan. There's, you have like the World Bank, you have ADB, but you have other organizations like CDIA, and they will actually help you. There's technical assistance they can provide you. There's proposal assistance they can provide you. There's many resources out there. PATA itself, we also can assist you in that regard and see how we can help you. So it's interesting to hear that because it's something that we've been discussing, and how we can also help our stakeholders, try to bridge that gap between their needs, and then how to get the investment for their destination.
Well said, and thank you both very much. Now, just before we go on to the next group, Linda actually put a question into the chat, and I think that actually Bijan and Paul, you guys you might be the best ones to answer this. Linda writes, we have very many beautiful tourist destinations in the Philippines. Unfortunately, we're also always visited by strong typhoons that add up to difficulty making a sustainable comeback, especially after COVID. Question, what would be the best way to be resilient?
Want to start off, Bijan?
Well, we could talk about this for a long time.
I will say this, the Department of Tourism of Philippines, they've always been a strong proponent of resiliency, right? When me and Bijan, when we did our workshops in 2015, we were hosted in Cebu, right? We've had PATA events there, and they've asked us to make sure to include components of that. So for one thing, that's a good sign for the Philippines is that the government is supportive of this idea of resiliency, which is extremely important. If you don't have the government's supportive of that, then you go nowhere. So that's the first part. Then, of course, you have to do your assessments, and that'll be the next step, right? And that's an important step. And then from there, you're going to build out, okay, what are your needs and what do you need to focus on? Bijan, I guess you can go to the other steps afterwards.
Yeah, no, for me, I've worked many years in the Philippines with the Earthquake Megacities Initiative, with PATA on this project. I'm coming in from Germany here, and I can say Philippines is way ahead in many ways in terms of resiliency than a lot of countries, where I'm from here, because, you have FIVOLCS that has created tools that give you detailed assessments at a very high resolution of what your hazards are. There are, the comprehensive development plan that's risk informed. It'd be a dream to have something here in municipalities. So there are many, many tools given the context and the exposure that the Philippines has. I guess one way to build resiliency, having these tools that makes it count is sort of a planning process that includes various stakeholders, and it's not sort of top down or driven by one or two main groups, but that brings in the private sector importantly. I mean, those are all areas where I feel more work can be done also in the Philippines.
Okay, wonderful. Let's go to our last breakout group. Now, unfortunately, Damien has been challenged with internet connectivity today and is not able to be with us right now. Fortunately, he was with us for both the breakout groups. But, Fernanda, would you mind giving, some of your insights on the discussions in your breakout group, please? And sorry, just before that, Arlene, we thank you very much. But if anyone else has any other questions, please put them into the chat and we'll try to get them before we close. Fernanda, please.
Hi, great, thank you. We talked about how one of our modules covers the post-crisis planning, which involves respond, rethink, and recover. So Damien was telling how the rethink step is so important because COVID, as he stressed, wasn't a crisis, was a phenomenon, and everything has changed. And with his experience, he noticed that the destinations that are resilient are those ones that were able to rethink the markets and products and are not doing things as they did before. He gave a funny example of like a video campaign that just is basically the same as before, but with people wearing masks and saying, okay, we're safe now, please come. And he doesn't see this as a right approach. He thinks that we should take advantage of the changes in demographics, pay attention to these changes, and tailor the new strategies based on more independent travelers and travelers that are going to spend more and not, so that's why the rethink phase is so important. And we talked about this part a lot. And yeah, that's just a quick summary.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to get to a couple of questions that have come through. Arlene, your question is wondering if the hybrid-based platform is suitable to all types of tourism. Now, with that, I think you mean like the TDR platform program, where we have online, but we also have in-destination. Arlene, could you just let us know, am I correct in the assumption of that?
She said yes. Graham.
Oh, she said, okay, great. Well, I mean, really, the TDR program is quite focused on the destination management organization, the DMO, at the destination level. So if, by that you mean sort of all sort of tourism, so the tour operators, the hotels, et cetera, I would say yes, in the sense that we need to build the governance, we need to build the infrastructure, we need to have the planning in place at the destination level that can allow the private sector to flourish, to be responsible, to be robust, and to be resilient. So I guess in that sense, I think that, yeah, a hybrid platform is probably suitable for pretty much all. Now, having said that, every destination is different, and there is no one size fits all. So in every program that we've been running in destination, in local language, we have to do pre-assessments beforehand. And those pre-assessments mean that we have to customize the program for that destination. So it's probably suitable for all with customization. Let me just check one more question here just to see. There's one of the most successful is bottom to top way of designing an ecosystem of tourism where local communities have a big role. The local government as facilitator, local as driver. Yes, I mean, I agree. And I think that's one thing that, you know, throughout most of our experts have tried to identify and discuss is that we need to be working at multiple levels. We need to be working at national level. We need to be working at local levels. We need to be bringing in the community stakeholders. So yes, I think we would all definitely agree with that. Okay, I would like to say thank you very much to all of our experts and to all of our PATA staff for the breakout sessions. Before we close our workshop though, we do want to just address some of the next steps that are coming. And with that, I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Alethea Tan. And Alethea, if you could just give us some next steps that are coming with TDR, please.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, Gray, for the opportunity and for the deep dive workshop that we have experienced today. It's been such a pleasure to hear voices from all around the world talking about resilience in terms of community, resilience in terms of infrastructure, in terms of destination management and communication. And I really think where we started with the opening speech of Liz, our CEO, where we really wanted to drive home the message that it was important for a multi-stakeholder approach, it was important for a transformational approach. Like all this was very evident in our discussions today. So in terms of the next steps for the PATA's Tourism Destination Resilience Program, very simply, as you had mentioned right from the start, we do have 7 different tools. And the last tool was the PATA Tourism Destination Resilience Forum that will be happening in person at our PATA Annual Summit in 2022. So this forum will definitely be a moment for everyone to come together to discuss the topics of resilience in another deep dive session. It's happening at our PATA Annual Summit with the theme Reconnecting the World. The dates are October 25th to 27th. This is happening in person in the destination of Ras Al Khaimah, UAE, and we would like to invite everyone to join us for this event. It would really be the pinnacle of our tourism destination resilience program to have everyone present. So of course, I think I just want to end off with saying that the core of PATA's mission really is about how to help destinations and how to help the industry, especially right now at the crux of recovery from the pandemic. And so one other thing that kept coming up today is that for everyone who feels intimidated by the subject, everyone who feels like they don't know where to start, please know that PATA is here to walk alongside you in this journey of resilience. And one place to start is the Crisis Resource Center website, CRC, which is here on screen right now, www.crc.pata.org. Please join us there with all our tools and resources for your use to walk on this journey of resilience together. So thank you very much, Greg. Greg, do you want to unmute yourself first?
I would love to unmute myself and thank you. Well, everyone, thank you very, very much for joining us. And just in conclusion, I would like to, first of all, thank again GIZ for all of the support and all of the assistance that they have given us throughout our journey in putting together the TDR program. GIZ and BMZ, the ministry, for all of the support. It has been greatly, greatly appreciated. I would also like to really thank all of our experts that have joined us throughout this event. Our CEO, Liz, you know, to have Su Yin and His Excellency Mr. Tree and Andreas all join us at the opening panel was wonderful. And then in our breakout sessions with, you know, John Bailey and Bijan Kaze and Fanny Vong and Damien Cook, and just as well, all of the PATA staff that has helped throughout the program and getting this workshop together. Finally, I need to do a really, really big shout out to the ADB Seeds team and to all of the hosts that have put this program together. Jason and Michelle, you guys have been wonderful throughout, helping us to get everything together and allowing us this opportunity, and all of the support, the back end people who are putting all of the different technical parts together. So it has been greatly appreciated, and sincere thanks to all of the ADB Seeds team for allowing us to do this workshop. Finally, to all the participants, both those who joined us on the Zoom platform and those who are watching the live streaming, thank you for joining. And we hope that you've gained some more knowledge, some more understanding of the importance of resilience in tourism, and that some of the ideas, some of the aspects of the TDR program can quite possibly help you in your journey towards resilience. With that, would like to thank all of you, and we'll be closing the workshop. Congratulations and thank you.